that had they truly repented of this, I believe that God would have been merciful and would not have dealt with them harshly the way that he did. And in verse 35, it says, a fire came from the Lord and consumed the 250 men that offered incense. So there was actually, even though they didn't perish the way that, Korah and Dathan and Abiram did, they still perished. They still rose up against God's authority. They rebelled. And it was not a good situation for all involved. And the thing that gets me to this day, every time I read or hear these stories, the women and the children perished along with these men. And I send out a clear warning and a message to you ladies out there. Be careful who and what you're hooking up with, because you just never know. And sometimes I would think, wow, that is really not fair, for women and children to perish because of, what the men did. But there are instances where maybe the women knew what was going on. And I can think right now what comes to mind is Haman in the book of Esther. Haman's wife, I believe her name was Zeresh. She was among the counselors that Haman was talking to, and he had other people that was advising him when he was trying to think of ways to get rid of Mordecai. He hated him because he would not bow and pay him homage. And then he came up with this wicked plan to annihilate the entire people because, this man just wasn't basically giving him respect. And how prevalent is that today? How many fights have taken place? How many people have been killed because someone wanted to be macho and show off their prowess and, in front of their women or whatever the case may be, or in front of their boys? Like, don't disrespect me, homie. That's the kind of stuff they used to say, back in Philly. And it's like, wow, seriously? Is it really that serious? But apparently, it was. And so, we don't know all of the situation, and we don't know all of the circumstances surrounding these events, but for whatever reason, they all perished, including their family. And then I can think of also when Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, it was the same situation. The men that accused him, they brought out their wives and their children, and they were thrown into the lion's den. So again, we don't know all of what took place, but what I do know is that there was no reset. That's a sad situation to be in. So men, if you're out there, if you're listening, if you can hear me, it is not too late. Maybe you're dealing with something right now. Maybe you're in something right now. Maybe you're in the midst of something right this very minute. Maybe you're plotting something. Maybe you're planning something. Maybe you're being pulled or lured into something. Hear me right now. It is not too late for you to reset. That's right. Hit that reset bell and rethink that thing, because you do not want to find yourself in a situation that you cannot recover from. And not only that, you can stand the risk, like the men in this and countless other stories. You can stand the risk of taking your entire family down with you. And then you have to do, as Jesus said in the word, you have to sit down and count the cost. Think about it right now as you are listening to this. Is it worth it? I'm thinking of a story that happened. This was when I was in high school. Every time, and it's not often that it comes to me, but I thought about it earlier when I was thinking about, these stories after reading the word. There was a young lady that we went to high school with, and I did not know her personally, but I knew of her because she was pretty popular on the school scene. at that time. This young lady was going out with a prominent drug dealer, kingpin, and he was in North Philadelphia. I believe his name was something like, they called him King Tut. I don't remember what his real name was, but the girl's name was Dawn Gross. This happened about 33 years ago, and I've never forgotten this story. And it haunts me to this day to think about it. He was a drug dealer, and she knew what he was into. And apparently she was lured into and attracted to this lifestyle that it afforded her. And the last time that I saw her, we had an assembly in our main building. I graduated actually from John Bartram High School in Philadelphia. And we had different buildings, the commercial annex, and then there was the motivational building. And, you know, sometimes we'd have something where everyone would have to come over to the main building. And whatever the assembly was, I can't recall at this time. I remember seeing Dawn, and there, you know, she was sitting across on the right-hand side. And in the midst of the program, before it got started, someone was playing, they were playing music. And Dawn and some guy just broke out and started dancing in, you know, in the rows where they were sitting. And a lot of people were getting all hyped up and like, oh, go Dawn. And they were like challenging each other or whatever. And a few weeks later, Dawn was dead. And it literally just shocked everyone. And when the story came out, I remember it being on the news, and I remember it being in the newspaper. And it frightened me. Even then, I was so frightened by what I learned about this young girl's life. And you would never know it to see her in the hallways and see her, you know, in the school, in that atmosphere, like I said, in the auditorium. And she wore big gold earrings and, you know, flashy jewelry, and had, you know, the last cut that I saw her with as far as a hairstyle was the asymmetrical. Well, I wore those things too as a young lady, but I wasn't dealing with a drug dealer. Thank you, Jesus. I never got involved in that scene or had a desire or dealt with, you know, I never had the bad boy type like that. That just wasn't what I was into. But they said in the article that her mother disclosed that she had received a letter from her daughter, and she told her, now I don't know what all was going on as far as the family. I don't know if they were for this relationship, and I believe that they said that, you know, there were people that were trying to get her away and trying to get her away from that lifestyle. But her mother said in the letter, she told her that she loved him so much that she would not want to live without him. And if anything were to happen to him, then she want to go with him. And on the news, they said, they showed the home and everything, but they said someone, you know, they broke into the home or whatever, and they gunned down everybody in the home, including Dawn. She was there that night. And so they were all killed together. And it was such a tragic story. I never forgot that. And I thank God that he kept me from that type of scene, that type of crowd, and that I just never had a desire to be. I never had a love for money. I never had that. I thank God for that. I never was that female, and I feel so bad, and my heart goes out to women who get caught up in these lifestyles for whatever the reason. And I'm not judging you. It's only by the grace of God. I am not. All I am saying, woman, if you are out there, if you are listening, if you are hearing my voice right now, it is not too late for a reset. Yes, you can change your mind. You can change your direction. You can go to Jesus. You can ask him to help you. You can, seek out, get the help that you need. Just think about it. I just gave you an illustration of a biblical story, a few biblical stories where the wives and the children went down with the men, and it does not have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. Let's look at Abraham. Some of these I'm just going to kind of mention a few things, and I'm going to keep it pretty brief because I've done other episodes on people like Abraham and in fact, I just did a podcast on Abraham, but I really talked about the second portion of his life where he remarried. But Abraham was what God called the father of many nations, and we know that he was a real man. We know that the reason why God chose him, he said, I believe it's in the 12th chapter of Israel, the 12th chapter of Genesis, because God said, I know him and he will command his household well. God knew that Abraham would trust him and he would walk in obedience. Does that mean that he never failed? No, that does not mean that. Abraham was called out of paganism. His family was, worshiping other gods, and God came to him and he said, get out of your land, get out of your father's land, get out of the country, everything that you're familiar with, and just leave and go to a land where I will show you. And so Abraham had to learn to trust God. But what he did initially, where he started his first mistake, was he took his nephew Lot, and God never told him to take him or take anyone. He just said, get out of this land. And I have podcasts on that. Do you got a lot? Lot brought a lot of strife and contention, and you can read about that, in the book of Genesis. But Abe failed sometimes in his life. He failed when he listened to Sarah, his wife, and brought Hagar into their marriage and ended up with an Ishmael on his hand, which was not the promise. God had promised them that Sarah would bear him a son. Isaac was to be the promised child, and they waited for 25 long years. So, we can't knock them too hard. They waited, they trusted, they did wait on the Lord. But at some point, Sarah got this idea like, maybe if I give my maid to him, then she can bear a child and I can still bring up children on my knees. And the reason why she was thinking and feeling this way is because she was getting up in age. She heard that clock ticking. And back in those times, it was really shameful for women not to be able to produce children for their husbands. Children were very valuable for a lot of reasons, but especially not to be able to give your husband a male child. And so, Sarah probably was feeling that. She was feeling that pressure. She was feeling that shame. And so she did what we do. She tried to help God out, and they ended up with a mess on their hands. Okay. That wasn't the only thing. He lied a few times, at least twice that we know of, when he said that Sarah wasn't his wife, she was his sister, which wasn't actually a lie. It was just a half truth. But he told the lie to the kings because they saw Sarah, and the Bible says that she was a fair woman to look upon. And he went to her and said, look, when we go to these places, just tell them that, you're my sister, because they'll kill me for your sake. So see, he feared for his life. He was like, but they'll save your life. And so he went along with this plot. And what that suggests is that he wasn't fully trusting God. He wasn't really putting his trust in God. And he thought that he had to handle the situation, and kind of got them in some stuff that they didn't necessarily have to be in. But guess what? Can you say reset? because in those instances, when he lied, when he failed, when he did what he thought was best as a man, God ended up turning that situation around, and they came out of those places with great wealth. And so you can read the story